Lift up your heart and praise. Lift up your hands and praise. Lift up your voice and praise.
And Moshe said, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. These words which I'm commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to everyone worshiping with us at home. Hope this is going to be a blessing to you today. The name of this message is called Healing the Inner Child. Well, today I'm going to talk about something that many may find controversial. Some may get offended because it's too hard to hear. Some may say it's psychobabble. Some may say it's just babble. And others might say it's just psycho. All right? There are those too who will likely become offended because of deep, deep hurts in their lives. Very deep hurts in their lives. Some people have gone through abuse and humiliation and things that are just unimaginable that are they're just terrible. And they can oftentimes not gain freedom from this, and this is no way intended to minimize their pain. But it will hopefully help someone, and hopefully it will help someone grow from some of the trauma that they may have had in their lives. Today I want to talk about healing the inner child. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with this, it's a concept which has been advanced in by many in the world of psychology, psychotherapy, and self-help advocates. It acknowledges that the person who we are is, of course, a product of many things across our developmental timeline, particularly the part of which is the child of our childhood, and the experiences which contributed towards our makeup. Turn with me to Proverbs. We're going to spend a good bit of time in Proverbs today, but turn with me to Proverbs chapter 22. Mishlei 22. We're going to be on page 747 in the 98 ISR. Proverbs 22, I'm going to read one verse. Verse 6, it says, Train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he turns not away from it. Oftentimes that training is good and positive and leads to well-adjusted children. Other times that training is quite to the contrary. Can anybody relate? Yeah. But even in the best childhoods, there are things that wound. And frequently, even though, they wind up resulting in unhealthy emotional behaviors. Okay? Because even though we have all grown up now, even when he's old, he turns not away from it. Okay? And in many ways, we auto-respond to the way that our child was trained. All right? Good ways are good. All right? But the wounded part can be a cause for real problems. All right? The idea of healing the inner child, though there are many variants, oftentimes comes down to the adult you, parenting through love and affection, the child part of your makeup, so as to repair some of the damage. Right? And teaching you to come to love yourself as you're supposed to be, rather than living up to the expectations of others, which were formed through the eyes of the heart and mind of the child who we once were. All right, I'm going to read that again. All right. Rather than living up to the expectations of others, which were formed through the eyes, heart, and mind of the child who we once were, and ultimately will always have with us. All right? That's a very good reason to heal that child so that we can love ourselves appropriately. All right? Turn with me to Matthew chapter 22. Matthew 22. We're going to be on page 944 in the ISR. We're going to start reading in verse 37. Matthew 22, verse 37. And Yahshua said to him, "You shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being and with all your mind." This is where he was asked about what's the great command in the Torah. He said, "This is the first and great command, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commands hang all the Torah and the prophets." Love your neighbor as yourself shows us that we're supposed to love ourselves with a healthy love. You see that? All right? If your love for yourself is full of self-loathing, I don't want any of that. You can keep it. Okay? Look at one verse in Psalms. Psalm 139. Psalm 139. Page 723. Psalm 139, and we're going to read verse 14. "I give thanks to you, for I am awesomely and wondrously made. Wondrous are your works, and my being knows it well." So it would serve everyone well for us to love ourselves, not with conceit, but with a healthy love of self, so as to love our neighbors well. Amen? All right, do you see that? I want to share a little story from my childhood. All right? Ms. Fowler was my first grade teacher. And though not always, she frequently looked very sour. She was an older lady, and she looked very sour. Perhaps my first day in first grade helped me to see her in that way. I don't know. Well, all of the children had been given mimeograph paper. Now, a lot of you here don't know what mimeograph paper is. Some of you know what mimeograph paper is. They pass it out and used to smell of it. I don't know why. All the children had been given mimeograph paper, and it was partitioned with several little pictures to color on it. Now, I wasn't great at coloring. That would be a bit of an understatement. It was as if the lines had been put in place to be an impediment to my artistic spirit. And they were merely there so as to give me a boundary to push past. That's right, to push past. Not really. I just couldn't stay in the lines, to be honest. But I really, really wanted to make a good impression on Ms. Fowler, my first day in first grade. Because I wanted her to appreciate what a good student I aspired to be. All right? I knew what a good grade looked like. I'd been in kindergarten. I knew what a good grade looked like. So up at the top of the paper, I very deliberately put a capital A. And then I thought, I'm going to add a plus. And then I put a 100 and a star and a check. Those were all the good grades I knew. Those were all of them. That ought to do it. I mean, you know, that's pretty impressive. All right. I really wanted her to like me for being a good student who wanted to make good grades. All right. Ms. Fowler was methodically easing her way up and down the aisles. She was going between the desks and surveying the work that the children were doing. I was anxious to see how excited she would be at my attention to excellence and achievement. She finally was approaching from behind me, and as she stepped just to my left, I turned my beaming little face up to her and smiled and said, "Look what I made, Miss Fowler." I thought she would be so proud. She looked down at my work with dourness, laid her hands across the paper, and in one swift squeeze, yep, it became a crumpled crash. "I don't think it's that good," she said. Then proceeded to make her way down the aisles, admiring the other children's work, as I sat there feeling very ashamed. I was wanting to do good to impress my teacher. Oh, I made an impression, all right. But she made a bigger one on me. I was only 6. Now, there are lots of other ways that Miss Fowler could have taught me that it was the teacher's responsibility to grade the papers, and even how to encourage me to stay within the lines. In actuality, what she did instead was break something further that little Stanley was already struggling with at home, and which was already damaged and already fragile. All right? Now, this is not the worst thing that ever happened to me by a long shot. And you have wounds too that in many cases are horrific. But like most of you have done, I spent a lot of my adult life dealing with wounds from my childhood, which caused me to make lots of bad decisions in my areas of life because of brokenness. All sorts of areas of my life. Right? Now, my intention here is not to bare my soul and use this as a group therapy session. I merely wanted to share how even sometimes one little thing can hurt a child for many years to come. Right? Contributing to the development of an adult who may never get those things resolved ever. I have no idea what made Miss Fowler do that day. And there's a very good chance that she did not even remember it at all later on. I happened to see her once upon a time, many years later, as an adult at a church service when I had gone back home to visit with my grandmother. And I expected her to be just as sour and cold as I remembered her. She'd become very old and such a diminutive and little lady. She had shrunk. She had shrunk. She had a sweet smile and a humble presentation of herself. And she was so proud to see one of her little students all grown up. She didn't remember that. Maybe she was just an old person trying to get into heaven. But she was not as I remembered her, and to be honest, I'm sure that Ms. Fowler was directed by her wounded child too. Because we all are. Now, most of us, and that would include our parents, are a product of our experiences. Sadly, it is the folks that trained us up in the way that we should go. They were messed up with their own wounds that were passed along. And the fact of the matter is that you can't give what you ain't got. But you sure can give what you do have, whether something good or something bad. All right? And if it's pressurized and all bottled up, it can blow all over everyone and hurt those around when it does. Now, unless you're one of those folks who starts rolling their eyes at the mere mention of this inner child stuff, you have probably been mostly okay with this up until now. But now's where it gets hard. You see, when Yahweh gave me the idea for this message, He gave me this idea one morning as I was waking up. And the word was, when I started to wake up, was healing the inner child. But in like a second from getting that, I realized that it wasn't spelled H-E-A-L-I-N-G, but rather H-E-E-L-I-N-G, the inner child. I thought, wow. I got up and went to the dictionary. And lo and behold, in the definitions to heal, H-E-E-L, were these: into agreement or line, and close behind. He wants us to have the inner child in agreement and walking close behind. All right? He wants us to heal the inner child so He can heal the inner child. Blam. Well, isn't that the command that you give a dog, Stan? Get him to heal? Well, David likened us to worms, which is further down. That's something dogs get. All right. Look with me, Matthew chapter 15. Matthew chapter 15, we're going to start reading in verse 22, page 935. Matthew 15:22. And see, a woman of Canaan came from those borders and cried out to Him, saying, have compassion on me, O Master, son of David. My daughter is badly demon-possessed. But He did not answer her a word. And His taught ones came and asked Him, saying, send her away, because she cries after us. Asked Him, yeah. And He answering said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came and was bowing to Him, saying, Master, help me. And He answering said, it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. But she said, yea, Master, for even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from the Master's table. And Yahshua answering said to her, O woman, your belief is great. Let it be to you as you desire. And her daughter was, what's that next word? Healed from that hour. Okay, even the little dogs. Even the little dogs. So don't let that trip you up. He wants us to heal, H-E-E-L, the inner child so that He can heal the inner child. All right? But here's where it gets hard. Raising children is hard, and you won't do it perfectly and raise children who are unaffected by your imperfection. Why? Because people are not perfect. Right? Just as your imperfect parents, who were raised by imperfect parents, gave what they had and wounded you just the same as they were, You're no more perfect, nor I. Now, you may be guarded against certain things because of particular wounds that you may have, but parenting doesn't simply mean giving the child, inner or otherwise, everything it wants. And that's the big challenge when one decides to parent their inner child. Since it's very hard for us to distinguish between what is healthy and what simply makes the child feel good when the child gets what it wants. Let that sink in a little bit. We need good counsel when it comes to this. I'm not saying that it's not something that shouldn't be done. I think that it should, because that's one of the ways that we can get better. But we need good counsel when it comes to this. And you should not do this alone. All right? Remember, you can't give what you ain't got either. Now that's going to upset some of you. But you can learn it and get it if you're willing to HEEL, heel to the Father and walk in step with Yeshua. Believe it or not, Yahweh also directed me to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. How many people in here are familiar with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Everybody? That's good. You may know it as Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Yeah. I had it read to me when I was in elementary school. I've seen both of the movies. Been a long, long time since I've seen the movies. I can tell you it's not something that's in the front of my mind. And yet, there it was. All right? It is a great book. It's remarkably written by Roald Dahl. I went and listened to the audio version of it this week to help get me refreshed. I'm like, what? You know what? So I went through and I listened to it. All right. Roald Dahl frequently wrote stories of children overcoming adversity at the hands of nasty people. All right. Oftentimes toxic adults. He wrote James and the Giant Peach, for instance. Everybody know that story? I was surprised at just how much little Stanley had in common with little James. But right now I was directed to Willy Wonka and that story while preparing for this. You see, there are 5 children who receive golden tickets to go to the Wonka Chocolate Factory. All right? Charlie was the last to find a ticket, and Charlie was a child born to hunger, adversity, and poverty. Charlie was a humble child who lived in a house, a very humble house, where everyone was loved. From the grandparents, all 4 of them slept in the same bed. You think your quarters are cramped. All 4 of them slept in the same bed, and they never got up. They had not been out of the bed in 20 years. You'd think they'd be grumpy. But no, everybody loved everyone, all the way down to the parents and down to Charlie. The mattresses were laid in the very drafty floor where it was so cold to sleep at night, and they ate 3 meals a day, all of which consisted of a cabbage dish. Like cabbage and cabbage soup. Okay? Not a lot to go along with the cabbage. All right? Charlie was a caring and giving child, but you see, loving and giving was modeled for Charlie, as well as a strong sense of family. Proverbs 20. Page 745. Proverbs 20, verse 11. Even a child is known by his deeds, whether his work is clear and right. And that was what we learned about Charlie. And then you have the other 4 children. These children get whatever they want because their parents don't parent. They don't teach them family bonding and discipline, etc. They teach them that the child is all important, the most important thing, and they encourage the children to be self-centered. It's hard to love your neighbor as yourself when you are completely self-absorbed. All right? So, we have Miss Veruca Salt. Do you remember Veruca? Veruca, her daddy is rich. Absolutely rich. Whatever Veruca wants, he turns his whole factory over to opening up chocolate bars that he buys all over the place because his dear sweet Veruca wanted one of those golden tickets. All right? And all Veruca has to do is throw a tantrum, and Daddy gets her whatever Veruca wants. She's depicted as a most unpleasant person. She wants an Oompa Loompa. Everybody knows what an Oompa Loompa is. She wants an Oompa Loompa, but they're not for sale. They're not for sale, no matter how much Daddy insists. She pitches a fit for one of these trained squirrels. The squirrels are trained to find bad nuts, and they would drop the nuts down the chute to the refuse. And when she is told no, they are not for sale, she goes to get one of the squirrels anyway, and the squirrels determine that she's a bad nut, and they throw her down the rubbish chute. She and her mother and father emerge at the end of the story, and they are all covered in rubbish because they all wind up going down the chute together. Then there's this young man named Augustus Gloop. Now, and I love the names. I think Veruca is a variant of Baruch. And we won't get into that etymology of these names, but you can figure out Augustus Gloop is a named after one of the Caesars, Augustus Gloop, which kind of sounds like what Augustus probably sounded like. He's depicted as being incredibly fat and won't stop eating. He is an absolute glutton. His mother encourages it. She tells the reporters when they all come to see who got the next golden ticket, because the reporters show up at each one of the kids' houses, and that's where we learn a lot about them. She tells the reporters that eating is his hobby. She says he wouldn't eat so much if he didn't need nourishment, would he? Besides, it's all vitamins anyway. If you know this story, Augustus won't stop slurping and glurping up the chocolate in the chocolate river that flows through the plant, even though Mr. Wonka's saying, stop, it's not supposed to be touched by human hands. Augustus is over there glooping it up, and he falls into the river of chocolate, and he winds up being sucked up this big tube, only the tube is not as big as Augustus. Somebody's got to conform. And after a certain amount of pressure is exerted, Augustus is carried away. At the end, he emerges too, but much thinner as a result of this squeezing process. Violet Beauregard is an absolute brat. She wants people to think that she's just great for all of her small accomplishments. Self-aggrandizing young lady. And when the reporter shows up, you see, she loves gum, and she just can't help but tell the reporters how important gum is to her life. All right? On and on and on she goes about gum. She had been chewing this current piece of gum for 3 months. A new record. She used to chew a new piece of gum every day before she started on this next accomplishment. And she would stick her gum on the buttons of the elevator because she thought it was so funny when people would come and stick their fingers in her old gum. Especially ladies with expensive gloves. Hee hee hee. She was disrespectful to adults, especially to her mother, and she would not relent when Mr. Wonka brought out this new gum that had 3 different courses in it of food, one of which was blueberry pie when you got to the end. And he said that it had not been perfected. Leave it alone, don't it? Well, she popped it in her mouth. Well, she turned blue and blew up like a giant blueberry and had to be rolled away by the Oompa Loompas. And she also got put in the squeezing room. And when she emerges, she's all squeezed out. However, her face is violet forever. Her face is blue from then on. Mike TV, the last little fella there. Oh, and by the way, all of these children are 9 years old. All of them are 9 years old. Right. Mike TV is absorbed with television. One might say for today, electronic entertainment. All right? And especially violent television. Like maybe some of the games we get absorbed with today. He idolizes the gangster lifestyle. He dreams of shooting and stabbing and the brass knuckles and all that stuff. He says, oh, that'd be the life. All right? He gets to watch this stuff all the time. They're not parenting. They're just leaving Mike to his own devices. He also mumbles a lot when he talks, and he's incredibly rude to people, especially when he's watching TV, and he's always watching TV. All right? He winds up jumping onto one of Mr. Wonka's television experiments that he has, and he gets shrunk. Isn't it kind of interesting? Everybody kind of gets reduced down. He gets shrunk into a television. They wind up having to put him into the gum stretcher to try to stretch him back out. And when he emerges, the Oompa Loompas have overstretched him, and he's 10 feet tall now. All right. Charlie, on the other hand, he stays in line. And he follows along close behind. Right? He heals, H-E-E-Ls. He heals himself, and he inherits the chocolate factory, and his whole family's lifted out of their dire straits. Have you ever met these children in real life? You bet you have. And you've met others with other problems too that, you know, that was enough to get the idea, you know. There's other people, other children with other problems that are just as bad. Now, it's natural for a child to ask, can I ... when they want something? All right? When the answer is no, it's not uncommon for a child to ask again, can I? Sometimes it goes like this. Can I? No. Can I? No. Can I? No. Please? No. But I wanna? No. Please? No. Can I? No. Can I? You've all been to the store. I hope you don't say it's happened at your house. All right? It is important to teach a child, inner or otherwise, to accept that we can't always have this and that. And no means what? No. Proverbs 19, we should be, verse 18. Discipline your son or daughter, because there is expectation, and do not set your being on his destruction. Okay, we can inversely read that. If you don't discipline your child, you'll be setting your being on his destruction. Okay? You'll notice that many adults will give in when a child is persistent, which teaches the child lots of different lessons. One of which is that no means no until you get your way. All right? The child needs to learn to heel, H-E-E-L, or to come in accordance with the parent. When you consider how an adult can be persuaded, and listen to what I'm saying here, when you consider how an adult can be persuaded by a child to finally give in, just how long do you think it will take the adult child to give in to the wants of the inner child? Not long. That's why we need to be careful how we approach dealing with the inner child. All right? We naturally want to nurture this child and give it all kinds of things that he or she missed out on. But we have to do this as a diligent parent, a loving parent, not a big child trying to be kind to our mini-me. If that little child is either being unruly or even pretty much running unrestrained, giving him or her everything that he or she wants may make the child feel good for the moment, but that doesn't heal the child. That doesn't heal the child. You see, sometimes the inner child is a spoiled brat. Sometimes it's a slothful pig. Sometimes it can be all sorts of things. Amen? All right. Proverbs 13. Proverbs 13, verse 24. He who spares the rod, what's that next word? Hates his son, but he who loves him seeks him with discipline. Bring your heart to discipline, and your ears to words of knowledge. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you beat him with a rod, he does not die. Beat him with a rod and deliver his being from the grave. My son, if your heart shall be wise, my heart rejoices, even I, and my kidneys exult when your lips speak what is straight. Do not let your heart envy sinners, but be in fear of Yahweh all day long. For certain there is a hereafter, and let your expectancy not be cut off. Hear, my son, and be wise, and guide your heart in the way. Be not among heavy drinkers of wine, or with gluttonous eaters of meat. For the drunkard and the glutton become poor, and slumber puts rags on a man. Listen to your father who brought you forth. Do not despise your mother when she is old. Buy the truth and do not sell it. Wisdom and discipline and understanding. The father of the righteous greatly rejoices, and he who brings forth a wise one delights in him. Let your father and your mother rejoice, and let her who bore you exult. My son, give me your heart, and let your eyes watch my way. You see, the child can't heal the child. If they could, they would have already done it. Think about that. What would Baruch's salt do to heal her inner child? Well, I guess she'd give it whatever she wants. How about Augustus Gloop? What would he give his inner child? Or Violet Beauregard? Or Mike TV? Do you think they would naturally say, let me walk in line with my master to be healed? Or would they run to their own desires? All right? Baruch would want it now. Augustus would want it more. Violet would be bragging about her latest lame accomplishment, some of which would be causing trouble for other people. All right? And she would be unkind to people. Mike TV would isolate himself, and he would bite and snap and be ugly to everyone who interrupted him. Each is driven by their own various lusts. Right? James chapter 1. James chapter 1, we're going to be starting in verse 13 on page 1174. James 1:13. Let no one say when he is enticed, I am enticed by Elohim, for Elohim is not enticed by evil matters. And he entices no one. But each one is enticed when he is drawn away by his own desires and trapped. Then when desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth death. Look back to Proverbs chapter 3. We're going to be on page 730. We're going to start reading in verse 11. Proverbs 3, verse 11. My son, do not despise the discipline of Yahweh, and do not loathe his reproof. For whom Yahweh loves, he reproves, as a father the son whom he delights in. I would say that if we're going to love that inner child, we've got to discipline that inner child. No matter how old you are, your childhood memories were seen through the eyes of a child. Now, I want to build on that just a little bit. You see, it doesn't mean that you didn't see what you remember. All right? But being a child, we oftentimes don't understand all the details. We're not aware of all the things that are going on amongst the adults and everything else that's happening. And even as an adult, and this is important, even as an adult, we're only able to operate off of the information that the child retained, that the child saw. We still don't know what the stuff was because it was outside of our realm of understanding. That can cause the adult to still hurt when the same thing as an adult would have been understood differently, and we can move on. But seeing it through the eyes of the child, we're not able to do that with it. That's why we need willingness to heal, H-E-E-L, and heal. That's why we need sound and righteous counsel. Did you hear those two words together? Righteous counsel. Not just anybody, righteous counsel. Mark chapter 10. We'll be reading in verse 13 is where we'll start, page 968. Mark 10, verse 13. And they were bringing what? What? Little children for him to what? Touch them. Would you little children like to be touched by Yeshua? Amen. All right. And they were bringing little children for him to touch them. But the taught ones were rebuking those who were bringing them. And when Yeshua saw it, he was much displeased and said to them, Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the reign of Elohim. Truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the reign of Elohim as a little child shall certainly not enter into it. And taking them up in his arms, laying his hands on them, he blessed them. Hallelujah. But you don't understand, Stan. My experience is different than yours. My dad, fill in the blank. My mom, fill in the blank. Those bullies. Let me say this, don't judge your insides by other people's outsides, because you really don't know what somebody's been through. I want to give you an example. This wasn't in my notes. We had a fellow that came here once upon a time. I'll call him Raymond. Right? Raymond had been brutally bullied much of his life. A friend of mine who knew Raymond when he was in school visited one day, and he said, "Is that Raymond?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, I used to go to school with him." Well, I asked him. I said, "You know my buddy?" And he said, "Well, I can't." This is what came out of his mouth. I can't remember if he was one of them that did the bullying or not. And I went back and talked to my buddy. He said, "No." He said, "It was terrible. It was terrible what they would do. It was just terrible." Well, Raymond to this day is jumpy and afraid not to be touched by people. When you go to give him a hug, he'll be like this. It's sad. When you go to shake his hand, he'll just kind of put it out there, and he'll still do the same kind of thing. Like, you know, one of the sisters up here, he was sitting in a chair one night, and they were getting ready to leave, and she walked up behind him and just leaned over and put her hands on his shoulder to say, "Raymond, have a good week." And as soon as she touched him, it was like lightning hit him. Both hands went up, both feet shot out, because he was so damaged. He was so damaged from the bullying. If you don't know that about Raymond, you just don't know that about Raymond. And it's true, I have different wounds from different places. But Yeshua did not heal the lame man from leprosy, nor give sight to the deaf. All right? Do you understand what I just said? All right. But he healed each according to their own affliction. Everybody. And whatever the affliction, the healing came from the same healer. Amen? All right. And no matter how badly you suffered, it does not minimize another person's wounds. Nor does it negate the healing that they may need. All right? Everyone's wounds are their own wounds. But look at this, Jeremiah chapter 1. Jeremiah chapter 1, page 467. Jeremiah 1, verse 4. Now, the word of Yahweh came to me saying, "Before I formed you in the belly, I knew you, and before you came out of the womb, I did set you apart. I appointed you a prophet to nations." Yahweh knew you in the womb too. And Yahweh has set you apart for that which He has set you apart. And He did know you And He has set you apart. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I was only going to read part of this, but I think I'm going to read the whole thing here. 1 Corinthians. We'll be on page 11, 12, and remember that we're talking about a child. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 1. If I speak with the tongues of men and of messengers, but do not have love, I have become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophecy and know all secrets and all knowledge, and if I have all belief so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am none at all. And if I give out all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I give my body to be burned, but do not have love, I am not profited at all. Love is patient, even when we're dealing with that inner child. Love is patient, is kind. Love does not envy. It does not boast, is not puffed up, does not behave indecently, does not seek its own, is not provoked, reckons not the evil or the bad, does not rejoice over the unrighteousness, but rejoices in truth. It covers all, it believes all, it expects all, it endures all. Love never fails. And whether there be prophecies, they shall be inactive, or tongues, they shall cease, or knowledge, it shall be inactive. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part shall be inactive. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I thought as a child. I reasoned as a child. And that's what I was saying a while ago about your child saw stuff as a child. But when I became a man, I did away with childish matters. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know, as I also have been known. And now belief, expectation, and love remain, these three, but the greatest of these is love. And I would say that when we are trying to work on that little hurt person inside of us, that we manage that with love, so that we grow that child into the adult that we need to be to serve. All right. Turn here, Matthew 11. Matthew 11, we're going to start reading in verse 28, page 929. Matthew 11:28. And Yahshua says this: Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I shall give you what? Rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble in heart, and you shall find rest for your beings. For my yoke is gentle, and my burden is light. Our last two passages are these to you little children. 1 John chapter 2. First John chapter 2. We're going to start reading in 1, and I told you this was to you little children. My little children, I write this to you so that you do not sin. And if anyone sins, we have an intercessor with the Father, Yahshua Messiah, a righteous one. And he himself is an atoning offering for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for all the world. And by this we know that we know him, if we guard his commands. The one who says, I know him, and does not guard his commands is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever guards his word, truly the love of Elohim has been perfected in him. By this we know that we are in him. The one who says he stays in him ought himself also to walk even as he walked. That means you're going to have to H-E-E-L. All right, now flip over to chapter 3 and verse 1. See what love the Father has given us, that we should be called what? children of Elohim. For this reason, the world does not know us because it did not know him. Beloved ones, now we are what? Children of Elohim. And it has not yet been revealed what we shall be, but we know that when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Wouldn't it be great to become as much like him as we can in what we have before this time? Teaching the inner child to walk closely to the Master and following closely beside is how we can heal. H-E-A-L. All right? After all, those who touched the zit of his garment were what? Are healed. His reminder of righteousness. All right? Raise up a child in the way that he should go. If we teach the inner child to H-E-E-L, heal, then we can truly heal. He wants us to heal so that we can be healed. Healing, H-E-E-L, healing the inner child is healing the inner child. Yevrekeka Yahweh ba'ish mareka ya Yahweh panavaleka bikoneka Yasa Yahweh panavaleka biasem laka shalom. Yahweh bless you and guard you. Yahweh make his face to shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahweh lift up his face upon you and give you his complete contentment.